Well, we're down here at the foot of Blenheim Street, one of the most famous parts of our, what you call a river trail, Vancouver's River Trail. And we're going to start here, and there's a new section just been opened of the river trail, so what a wonderful time to do it. And we'll walk from Blenheim to Balaclava, and we'll be looking south at BC Packers' old shipyard. They opened the yard in 1927. The cannery at the far end of the site opened in 1897. So it was really a lot of history. You can bring the kids down here, walk and have a look at the ducks and the slough, and have a good time. It's free. Hey. Yeah, there was a Japanese community lived here, and they ran little fish boats and fished in the river, and they worked at the cannery in the early 1900s. So these are some of the artifacts I've dug up in the mud, and you can see the size of the oars. They had to row a 20-foot boat and put their net out into the river just to the south of us here. And then in 1910, East Oak came here and into Vancouver and invented an East Oak engine, a little gas engine that could run canoes, it could run anything. So here's an example of the little carburetor off the gas engine, and this is for the drum drive. Would go up and down and make the drum go around and round. So it's kind of neat to have it. I dug it out of the mud. Someone threw it away. So today we're going to think about the people who were living here. There was 30 houses right where I'm standing behind me. There was a community called the Japanese, cannery, Celtic Island Cannery Community. And they lived along the river here, and we're not going to forget them. And we've got a story stone for them, and they've got their history over here. And there's rumors of development of the shipyard and the site now, but what's important to us is that we remember the history of these people. There was 40 people living here along the bank of the river, making a living from the river. I think that's very, very important that we recognize that before the big developers start to come in.
How old do you think this ore is? I notice it's got a copper hammered tip on it. Is that typical for
yeah, it's for a 20-foot gill netter, a ore gill netter, and where we're looking at now is a back slough. Just behind me here is what you call the Celtic back slough, and they would row to the river and then put their nets out and then come back in here, and the cannery will visit the cannery site to the east of it. But these oars were called torture sticks. They were so hard to pull on, and on the little 20-foot boat, the man who did the lady who did the rowing, actually she got paid 2% of the catch, and the man who put the net out got 3% of the catch. So, of course, the company they sold the fish to, the Celtic Cannery, they got 90% of the definite. It was a very hard way to make a living. They started fishing here in June the 10th, and they fished until the end of September, until the actual net froze onto the drum. And then they would say it's the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And then they'd come down here to a little shipyard. You'll see the remains of the shipyard just down here in the slough. And they came down here and had what you call a sockeye social, a time to celebrate the end of the season. So they all came here, and some fishermen still had their gumboots on, and they danced and they sang, and they celebrated the river. What else could you ask for? Well, this ore is kind of famous because the shed behind us was a schoolhouse, and it's gone now. It burned to the ground. But before it burned to the ground, we had an opportunity to grab a bunch of stuff out of from the burning fire. And we grabbed this ore, and it says "My gal." So somebody who had a wonderful little boat, and he rowed the boat, and I guess his daughter or friend of his was very important to him. And it's nice to have salvaged it from the fire. And the Japanese people probably will recognize this as one of their fishermen people.
And the name is?
My Gal.
My Gal. It sounds like a song from the 50s.
Yeah.
by the
I would
Ronettes.
say probably, you know, before this was being used, before they were taken away. They were taken away in 1942. The Japanese were sent to the interior because of the World War, Second World War. So probably somebody who lived in one of the houses here and fished. This belongs to them, and I hope to give it back to somebody. Is a celebration of the turn of our century, and the city put about 10 stones around Vancouver, and they picked out this one because of the story on here, the lost story of the Japanese people that lived here, and the stone came from, I guess, somewhere in Vancouver, and they printed on my story onto the stone, and it was voted one of the best. And I'm kind of proud of it. I thought to myself, well, we're celebrating the Japanese people who lived here. We're celebrating the cannery, and that's what it's all about. This was a log dump here in Dunbar, where we come from. All the logs that were logged there were brought down to the foot of Blenheim Street, and there was a little booming ground here. So it's kind of neat to recognize that our community of Dunbar has a stone along the river celebrating, you know, the logs that were cut in Dunbar a long time ago, in the middle of the 18th century.
Probably some of those logs became houses in Vancouver.
Of course. And they were dragged down here when they were put in the back slough, and they were boomed up in little log booms, and flat booms they called them, and taken to the mills and made into either shingles or lumber for our houses, which I think is kind of neat.
Okay. Would you have called Blenheim a skid road?
It was what you call a plank road. Yeah, they laid planks on the mud. This was a terrible place. I have a picture of it here, what it looks like, and when the loggers came down.
Okay, I'll just zoom in and have a look here.
They were called mud flatters, or mud. The people who built the dike were mud slingers, and you can see it's a good picture of what is a mudslinger and what is a mud flatter. A mud flatter lived in the flats, and this used to be called the Blenheim Flats, not Southlands. It was called Blenheim. This is the Japanese people that lived there. You'll see their boats tied up to the dock, and two little girls, Japanese girls, who were rowing a rowboat, 1936, and this is before they were taken away. And this is a good example of what you call our West Marine waves at the Celtic shipyard, and it's got a sub chaser up on there. And BC Packers bought a lot of ex-war boats, and I guess this is one of them. It's got a date on it's 2017, so it's a great full photograph. BC Packers didn't build a lot of boats; they bought a lot of boats. Now, this is a 1950 picture of the Celtic fleet, the small boat yard, and it was down, and there's a bridge over to Deering Island you'll see in the background, and Deering Island was an island of sand and bushes, and the net racks here, you can see the nets on the net racks. All the fishermen came in every morning and put their nets on the net rack to mend them and repair them. It's a great photo.
And Deering Island is all houses. It's all houses.
All houses, yeah. Where the bushes are, today is a housing development.
And they have their slips for their private boats.
Yeah, there's some private boats there, yes. But you can see the size of the fleet. This is a small boat yard. It's not the main one. We'll look at the main one now when you're finished taking the photograph. This is the small boat yard, or moorage for the small fishing boats, and it's at starting on Blenheim Street and going and taking a picture of Deering Island, and all the boats moored, and then the cannery building over here. So I got 1965 on the one we took this photograph from the bridge. It goes over to Deering Island, and as you can see, there's no houses on Deering Island, and it's a great little walk. If you want to come and visit us down here on the Blenheim Flats, or Southlands as they call it today, you can walk by and go on to Deering Island. There's a park there. You can enjoy a wonderful picnic. And this is an example of how the fishing fleet tied somewhere in the river. And there's probably numerous places like this all the way up the river. But we wanted to make sure we recognize this one, the Japanese people, their homes There's still a couple of homes of theirs over here. So it's a fairly important photograph.
What's interesting about this picture, though, is the size of the fleet in 1965. There were this many fishing boats still tied up here, and this was a very sheltered, protected enclave.
Correct. I mean, it's fresh water. You didn't have to paint the bottom of your boats every year. You could if you were fishing in the river, you would only copper paint once every second or third year. So if you were in salt water like Falls Creek, you had to paint every year, and it cost a lot of copper paint. It's very expensive. Let's recognize the wetlands, what used to be here at the foot of Blenheim Street, because you can come down here in the spring, probably in May and June, and look in the water and see these young salmon what are in this back slough, and it's neat. It's their future. I mean, they are leaving the river, these sockeye salmon fry, and they're going out to the middle of the Pacific Ocean and then coming back in 4 years' time. So I thought it's very nice. It's their future. And that's that when we did this little, informational package, we put this in because we felt we were always talking about us catching the salmon and processing the salmon. This is the wetlands, what these fish absolutely necessarily needed. And so my wife is an artist, so she did this little. This is a First Nations lady who did repairs to gillnet. She's hanging a huge mesh size. You can see the size of it. It's for catching Chinook salmon, and she's busily putting the lead line on. You'll see the lead weights on the line, and she's. They paid well. I mean, she got paid well for doing this work. A First Nations net mender, they call them. Anyhow, we were lucky to have them. Okay.
On the other side?
We thought we'd just get a picture of some guy along the bank of the river who was still fishing. This is about 10 years ago. So he was mending his nets, getting ready. You see the plastic floats on the nets. They've changed from the wooden floats to the plastic floats, which are much lighter. And the boat here is fishing. This one is up north in Rivers Inlet. You'll see the net going out. And he's got a fish in the net here. You see the corks are pulled down. So it's a good example of a double ender too. It's a boat with a point at the bow and a point at the back. So I thought it was neat. I didn't want to give it away up. And this guy here was really neat. So I thought he needs to be close to a boat.
He has stories, I'm sure.
This is a photograph of fishing just off the mouth of the Fraser River, and actually they're pulling the net in over a power roller at the back of the boat. It's so full of fish, sockeye. You'll see big sockeye, and I recognize them as Adams River sockeye. And the females are the smaller ones, and the big ones are the males. And this guy's got a huge catch of fish. He's smiling, and he knows that, he's going to make some money on this fishing opening. So kind of nice to have an example of, these are Adams River sockeye, and we hope to rebuild that run of Adams River sockeye. So this is what it used to look like. He filled the whole back of his boat with fish. This is a shot of Sussex Slough in 1958. They're all seine boats. Deering Island is in the trees in the background. There was a big net shed. You'll just see it on one corner of the photograph. These boats are putting their seines on and getting ready to fish. In 1958, it would have been the Adams River run. So they're getting their nets ready. They're pulling them out of the shed. The big net shed was called Maple Leaf Gardens. It was so big. I think it was kind of neat. And they're all lining up, getting their seines ready. They're going to fish the west coast off of Victoria, and catch Adams River fish, which are endangered today. We don't have many of them left. But this is an example of action in Celtic Slough when everyone's getting excited to go fishing on this run of sockeye.
Now, how would you know when it was an Adams River salmon?
It was time of year when the photograph was taken. It was in September.
And that was the time that they would run?
They're running through Johnson Straits and the Straits of Wanda Fuca. I think it's a great photo. It's well. This photo, my wife took it. She said she did. And it is a great photo. It's of the boat, the big boats. What were they doing just before they went fishing? We're standing here approximately where this photograph was taken in 1898. You'll see the bunkhouses for the Japanese people in the background. Yeah. You'll see the fleet with the oar here of rowboat fishers in the background. And the south foot of Blenheim is right here. Yeah. And it's probably the oldest photograph of what you call oar gill netters on the north arm of the Fraser River. There was other canneries on the river. In fact, there was 3 canneries on the north arm and 9 canneries in the middle arm. So there was a lot of sockeye came to these canneries. And this is an example of, you'll see the net racks up here drying and mending the nets. You'll see the little boats, the 20-footers with a big oar to row them, and the men doing the repairs. You would fish 6 days a week. You'd only have 1 day, Sunday, to go to church and to mend your net. I think it's an important photograph. 1890. This is a net that's been racked and it's ready for mending, or repairing the holes in it, and lead line is at the top and cork line at the bottom. So there's nobody mending it right now, but it's up on the shore to be mended, to be repaired and ready for the next opening.
How often would there be damage to the nets? Like, would every time that they would haul them in, would they need to do mending?
Well, you would have, for instance, in the Gulf, you would have probably the problems of whales getting into the net. Mm-hmm. And you would have the problem of other fish boats running into it. Mm-hmm. And there was always repairs to be done. Yeah, this is the pump which keeps Southlands dry. It actually is an electric pump, and it connects to this big ditch on the other side and a massive pipe. And then from here, the pump is just below ground. It pumps water out to the slough, to the back slough. Mm-hmm. And water which is drained, and during the high water, the water comes in here on the other side of the road, and it's definitely fills the ditches. So if there's a big rainfall and there's a big tide, there's a failure of electricity, we might have a problem.
So what level below sea level is the...
The road is 2 feet below sea level.
Right.
So if you're buying a house down here, you should remember that. If it comes over, you're going to get it.
No buying that, no money.
We're down at Blenheim and Celtic at the foot of Blenheim by the river. So Terry's going to explain the water in this ditch.
Yeah, each area of Southlands has a drainage ditch. And you'll see a large pipe, and the water goes, when the tide's going out, water goes to the pump out of the ditches. When the tide is coming in, it fills the ditches with water from the river. It's kind of a dual. So if there's a problem with the gate down there, or the pump, then there's a possibility there could be a flood here.
Okay.
Well, the city owns, they say 9 lots, but the Southlands plan, the whole community plan, cut those down to 3 lots, so we'd have barns and horses, and we wouldn't have a subdivision on the city property. But so far they've not recognized that, so there'll be 9 houses along Celtic Avenue, and we're not in agreement with it.
Okay, and now this is a new trail that's opened within the last...
The last lot here you'll see is a holding lot for water from Southlands. And then you'll see a big pond down here.
Yeah. That's
water draining from East Southlands, and it ends up here and goes into the pump and is pumped out into the river. So I don't know what, I think they're going to, probably if they build houses on these city lots, they will be, this one will be left for drainage purposes. Yeah, this is an area of water collection for Southlands. You'll see the pond, you'll see extremely deep water in the pond. It's 5 or 6 feet deep in some places. It's taking water from West Southlands and East Southlands and putting it into here, and then the pump will handle the pumping it into the slough. Mm-hmm. You'll see how deep and big this is. Called a holding ditch. Mm-hmm. So it holds water until the time is right for it to pump that water to the river. Hello.
Hello there.
What happens if you guys fall in that ditch?
Oh, we're gonna have to call a...
Somebody to lift your horse
Yeah,
up.
exactly, yeah. So fingers crossed.
So we're looking across this massive ditch here on the south side of Celtic Avenue, and we're thinking, where is the protective, dike? It is right under the trees across from us here. That's the old dike what was built in the 1870s by McGee. He built, they call it a mud dike. Mm-hmm. So what protects these very expensive homes in Southlands is this dike across the way here. There's no maintenance. It's never been upgraded. So it dates back to the 1860s, 1870s, when they were draining for cattle. The island, Celtic Island, is on the other side of this ditch, and the island was called a salty. A salty, in the spring, you would bring your cattle down, and they would eat the mosses and all the plants coming up on the island. And McGee didn't have very many cattle; he had a lot of horses, but he built this dike in 1870s, and we haven't done anything about it. We haven't upgraded it. We haven't decided whether it's going to flood Southlands or not. Probably will. Well, this bridge here is access to the protective dike, so-called protective dike, which is going to save Southlands in a flood. We've had a look at it. But the bridge was built so Murray's nursery across the north side of Celtic was a big, probably the biggest nursery in Vancouver. And he put all his trees on the top of the dike. You'll see all kinds of strange trees here. You look, they're not native to BC. When he left the site, he left his stock behind. The trees are some are very, very unique. So to get to his plants on the dike, he had to have a bridge to get across this. They used to call this the back slough. So he built this wooden, you see the ship spikes in the actual bridge. So he bought them from BC Packers probably. Wow. And he had wagons, and he would go along the top of the dike, put his plants there, and then when he sold one, he would call, I worked for him, I called me to bring my little wagon and go and get one of these trees for sale. Right. So the nursery leased the land on top of the dike, and he stored his big rhododendrons and other fruit trees and what have you right here. And this was the bridge I took my little cart out to go and pick one up with.
Now, and Murray Nurseries lasted till quite late. I used to buy plants down there.
Yeah, there was 2 or 3 different Murrays in the family. Yeah. There was one with a nursery on 41st and Mackenzie. Yeah. And there was another one, I think, on the east side of Vancouver. And he had some interest in Richmond, so he was. You can see the irrigation pipe going over to irrigate. You couldn't leave the plants just on the dike with no water. Right. You see irrigation pipe. Yeah. Hello. So we're on lot number 3. If it comes for sale now, you'll see the protective dike with the big trees sticking out of the top of it. So this is what protects Southlands now. If the water crashes through BC Packers, and you'll see the buildings in the background here, it'll fill this ditch to the top, and hopefully this is called, again, it's called a holding ditch. It's going to hold the water from getting to Celtic Avenue.
The pipe has survived, amazingly.
And there was a city dump here, and we're talking about 1930s and 1940s. The dike itself was a part of a city dump. Right. So we're not sure what is under the earth on this other side.
It could be a treasure trove of old bottles. And remember what happened out at Nanaimo and Grandview Highway?
I remember that.
The people descended in the hundreds, and it brought down the price.
I still see people walking in this ditch with the hip waders, looking at the bank. They figure there's something down here of value. Old bottles.
So are there any fish at all in this?
Now there's a little fish called a stickleback, and we've been very protective of it. It lives in the ditches of Southlands, and it ends up coming here and hopefully not getting squashed in the pump, and gets back to the river and comes back every spring. So we'll be waiting to see if in probably another 2 months if there's any stickleback in here.
Yeah. And I've never seen more blackberries in one place in my life.
There's 2 different species of blackberries here. If you look at them carefully, one's got a kind of a serrated leaf. That's the natural blackberry, and one with a smooth leaf is a Himalayan blackberry. But we got 2 different kinds. I kind of like the old one. It's got much sweeter. So here's the last remnants of our black cottonwood tree. We convinced the city not to cut this one down. This is a black cottonwood. It's been here probably pretty close to 100 years, and we want it to be here for our children.
There it goes way up there.
Very cooperative, and they know we appreciate this tree.
How often do they come to trim the...
I think they came about 3 months ago to do the edge of the dike.
So they only do this side?
Only this side, the trail side.
The trail side. And is this essentially a dike?
The other side is the dike.
And this side, this raised portion is not...
If you put a house here, you would have to raise it about 8 feet.
Right.
It's a low part of a dike, but it's very low.
Right, okay. And then and this point here is where this goes underneath and comes up through
on the other side of the holding ditch, which is holding water coming off of Southlands.
So that's a network that was... When did they put in these holding ditches?
Probably in the 1970s.
Oh, that late?
1980s, yeah.
And prior to that?
After numerous floods.
After numerous floods. Well, your history goes back quite a ways here, so now we're looking north on Balaclava from Celtic, and we're going to turn, and Tarek is going to explain the right-of-way for Balaclava originally went all the way to the river.
All the way to the river. That's why I have a trail. If it didn't go to the river, somebody would claim it. Blacksmith shop for the BC Packers, when they had to have rings made for the tables for the seine boats. They were all made here on the BC Packers float.
And that one burned in 1950.
In 1950.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a warehouse then, and but all the stuff inside the building, like antique, canning machines and everything, was buried under the building when they put this warehouse on it. So it really is an industrial archaeological site. Yeah, this is we're at the foot of Balaclava Street, looking at the river, and passing by is a packer, a herring packer. There's going to be a herring fishery up around Comox very soon, and these packers are heading out the river to actually, I guess they're going to buy herring off the fishermen. Subdivision has some regulations from the city that they had to display artifacts from from this shipyard, the BC Forestry shipyard, on the walkway, on the riverfront walkway. We're on what you call the Balaclava Vancouver riverfront walkway. And people, please come down here and enjoy it. It's a great view of the river and sunsets in the evening.
And I would
pictures of the fire, 1950. We talked about that.
Yeah.
We talked about BC Forest Service property. I have the photographs in here.
Okay.
And the boats.
I would say, is this a minus tide, a low tide? Look how low. I've never seen.
It's what we call a high tide coming in.
But look how low it is here.
It is low.
I've never seen quite this much exposed
At Christmas
here.
time, when there's a 16-foot tide, this walkway floods here.
Right here.
Right here.
The king tide.
A king tide.
A king tide, the water reaches this point.
This high. You'll see pieces of wooden and like as we walk along out here.
And
We're looking. This is a replacement marsh down here for the what was destroyed when they did the subdivision.
Mm-hmm. So actually, the subdivision could have had water lapping at their doorstep.
Yeah, but they had to build a dike. This is a standard dike. It's up to 2, but it's not wasn't built high enough. But we had to give up a lot for it.
So what are these like eelgrass, or what are the types of plants here?
Well, there's 2 plants that are very, very, susceptible to disease, but they put them in anyhow. But Carex limbii is probably the best salmon plant in the marsh.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no bulrush. We envision bulrush along the edges for shading, and we didn't get that. So you look over there, under the trees, you'll see a big pile of something. That is all the stuff from the cannery. The pieces of, tin and what have you for the cans.
Mm-hmm.
They just dumped it in the river. Big piles of it over there.
Oh yeah. Okay, we're looking across the river.
Wyatt, Wyatt Channel is over there. You'll see that used to be the main channel out of to the Salish Sea, and it's got a causeway across now to the sewage treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully there was a lot of salmon came up that Wyatt. I still call it Musqueam Wyatt. And it's called Iona Island.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we can get some compensation for it.
Yeah.
You'll see the docks are collapsing into the river now. There isn't much sign of the cannery being here. Cottonwood trees, a whole ring of them. There's eagles nesting there. I don't see any sign this year, but there has been. And this Iona Island's going to have a new surge plant on it, on the end of it here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of changes coming.
And you can actually see the airport control tower there.
Yeah, you've got the landing tower of the airport over there. So the developer, when he developed all these lots, he actually gave up some property for a waterfront trail, and that's what we're walking on now. And hopefully when there's other places along the river, we'll get the same thing. Here's my steam box. When we built these big wooden boats, we had to steam the lumber to soften it up. And this is one of my picks from the shipyard.
You go over and explain. How did it work? Give me an example of how you made these things work.
Planks inside the box. So from one end, put a bag over, usually a bag over there to stop the steam coming out. The steam went in here from a boiler. Filled the box up. The planks were inside. They had to be 30 feet long at least. Between 25 and 30 feet long, the planks. We soften them, we test them once in a while, see if they're limber enough to bend. If they were, we would get the crew ready. We're coming with 2 planks. So one for the starboard side, one for the port side. Mm-hmm. We're building ships. So this is a pretty important, it's an old drainage pipe really, but made into a steam box.
How many steam boxes would there have been?
This shipyard had 2.
2.
I saved one.
Right. Now, this is an original one?
Yeah.
With the metal
This
staves.
is a BC4 service. They moved in here in 1942 and started to build ships right away. Box here now is an important part of the shipyard. Probably the most important part of the shipyard, because when you're building boats, you have to bend the lumber. Fir bends very well if it's steamed, and you have to bend the ribs, or the frames of the boat, oak. And that's what this was used for, is for building a new boat or repairing an old boat where you had to bend the planking or the frames, and they had to be steamed and soft and bendable. They pushed in here, the steam came in the middle of the box, and people like me would test them to see if they're ready or not. We used to call it, are they ready? Are they ready to be bent on the boat, on the forms of the boat? So, pretty important part of the shipyard. And there was 2 steam boxes here, and I managed to, to save one. And I'm proud. All the artifacts, and there's another 5 or 6 artifacts along the river, are because I said, we're not going to give up our history. Our history is important to us. This trail is wonderful. I come down in the evening and watch the sunsets. I come down here and watch the tide go up and down. It's lovely.
And then on a weekend, how many people do you think come down?
I think there's been an increase in people coming down to the river or coming to Pacific Spirit Park. I'm looking at a Saturday and a Sunday here, fairly close to 80 or 90 people.
Yeah, great.
And it's a walking kind of a thing. They bring their dog, and they exercise, they walk, they exercise, they get the fresh air blowing in from the Gulf of Georgia or Saley Sea. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Okay, here I am.
Okay, here, just a minute. We've got Terry. We've got Terry standing right there.
It must be here.
There we go. Not an inch without the winch. Okay, let's go in
Let's
here.
go look at the winch. Right here, I picked the block which the cables went through. Is over here, and the winch is over here. Came down on a barge from Johnson Straits, a place called Sonora Island.
Okay.
And the winch was in a shipyard, BC Forest Service shipyard on Sonora Island, and it was a village on Sonora Island, and to get power they had Pelton wheel running off a waterfall, and this winch also participated in power for this little community, and in Sonora Island it brought the boats out of the water and also contributed to the powering of lights in the little village there on the island. And they said, you can't have it, it's too big. I said, no, I chose it. You told me I have a choice.
So you go and stand there and tell the story.
And I used to operate this winch. I'd pull the boats up, put the cable onto the marine railway, and pull up the boats on the marine railway. And it's old. Dates back probably 1910, 1915.
Now, one is the brake, or one is the...
One's a brake and one's to release.
And reverse?
Let the cable go and the boat back into the water.
Right.
You pull it up and then you would put it back in the water. Please come and visit it. It's really neat.
So where would you have been? Where would this have actually been located?
It was inside Building 1 and on the site.
On the site.
There was 5 buildings on the site.
How many winches did they have?
No, one building was strictly for doing fire pumps and stuff like that, firefighting stuff. Another was the marine end of it, was at the west end of the site.
Right.
And this was in the marine building, and it ran 2 marine railways.
And it was heavy? I mean, to move this thing looks pretty substantial.
It is really, I mean, it's built in Tacoma, Washington, of all places, and it was barged up to Sonora Island to operate the BC Forest Service early shipyard on Sonora Island. I have all the information on it. So.
Okay, now let's go around the back, because the electric motor is around the back.
Yeah.
And have a look at the electric motor. As I had a look at this on another visit, and you can see the reduction gears and the chain drive from the electric motor.
It is really neat.
Yeah. So there it is. And
They didn't want us to have it because it was too heavy to lift out of the building. But I convinced them that they had made a promise.
Right. And it's lovely because it still has the chains, the chain drive on it. So it goes through these various reduction gears in order to operate the winch, which is really interesting. And it actually says English Electric Canada on the side of the electric motor here.
Yeah. Here she is right here. The builder's got a plate on this side here. Puget Sound.
Oh, there it is.
Ironworks. Tacoma, Washington.
Yeah.
Wow. It is one of the nicest riverfront walkways on the Fraser, no doubt about it.